The last time I stood in my father's office, he called me a liability and told me to choose between my unborn child and my place in this family. I chose the door. Now, 7 years later, I am holding a certified letter that tells me his empire is crumbling under the weight of bad loans and worse decisions. He thinks I disappeared, but I was just waiting for the moment when his debts would become my assets. Peace is something you have to build with your own hands. Brick by quiet brick. I had spent the last 7 years mixing the mortar myself. My life in the suburbs of Philadelphia was small, deliberate, and fiercely guarded. I had a job in logistics that paid the bills and kept my mind sharp. A modest 2-bedroom townhouse with a small yard where the grass was always cut on Saturdays. And a 7-year-old son named Leo who had never seen me cry. To Leo, I was just mom. I was the person who made sure his soccer cleats were clean and his toast was cut into triangles. He did not know that I was also a ghost. He did not know that Piper Morgan was a name that used to mean something else in a town called Halston, 3 hours south of where we sat eating oatmeal on a Tuesday morning. I had curated this life to be boring. Boredom was safe. Boredom meant no sudden movements, no late-night phone calls, and no lawyers. Then the mail carrier arrived. It was a Tuesday in October, the kind of day where the air felt crisp and smelled of dried leaves. I was working from home, reviewing shipping manifests for a client in the Midwest, when the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked to the front door, expecting a package I had ordered for Leo's upcoming birthday. Instead, the postal worker held out a flat, rigid envelope. "Sign here, please," she said. I looked at the return address before I took the pen. The name of the law firm was Greer & Klein Legal Group. The city was Halston, Maryland. My stomach did not just drop. It vanished. It felt as if the floor had opened up beneath my socks, dropping me into freefall. I stared at the black block lettering on the envelope. Piper Morgan, formerly of... They had listed my father's address, the house with the pillars, the house where I had learned to walk, and the house where I had been told to leave. "Are you okay, ma'am?" the carrier asked. I blinked, forcing a smile that felt tight and unnatural on my face. "Yes," I said, just surprised. I signed my name. My hand was steady. I had learned a long time ago that you never let your hands shake when someone is watching. I took the envelope into the kitchen and set it on the granite counter. It sat there like a bomb. For 10 minutes. I just looked at it. The silence in the house, usually my favorite thing, suddenly felt heavy, pressing against my ears. I used a knife to slit the top open. I pulled out 3 sheets of heavy cream-colored paper. It was not a lawsuit. It was not a summons. It was a notice of potential interest. The language was dense, filled with the kind of legal jargon that is designed to make normal people feel stupid and small. But I was not stupid, and I was done being small. I read it 3 times, parsing the sentences until the meaning became clear. A corporate loan connected to Morgan Industrial Supply, my father's company, was in distress. The bank that originally held the note was offloading it, likely bundling it with other toxic assets to sell to a third party. Because my name was still technically attached to a dormant family trust I had forgotten existed, a trust that had once been used as collateral for a secondary guarantee. I was being notified. They were not asking me for money. They were telling me that the ship was sinking, and they were legally required to wave a flag at anyone who might still be on the passenger manifest. Morgan Industrial Supply. The name brought the smell of machined metal and sawdust back to my nose. It brought back the memory of my father's voice. I sat down on the kitchen stool, the paper trembling slightly in my fingers. The memory hit me hard. A physical blow to the chest. It was not a vague recollection. It was a high-definition replay of the worst afternoon of my life. 7 years ago. I was 25 years old, standing in my father's study. The room smelled of lemon polish and expensive scotch. The mahogany desk was a barrier between us. Wide and imposing. My father, Everett Morgan, did not look at me. He looked at a spot on the wall just above my left shoulder. He was wearing his gray suit, the one he wore for board meetings and funerals. "You are a liability. Piper," he said. He spoke the words as if he were discussing a faulty piece of machinery or a shipment that had arrived damaged. There was no heat in his voice. That was the worst part. If he had screamed, if he had thrown a glass, I might have been able to fight back. But his coldness paralyzed me. I was 3 months pregnant. I had come to him for support, for advice. Instead, I had triggered a panic I did not understand. "Daddy, please," I had said. My voice sounded young and pathetic in my own ears. "I can handle this. I just need a little time to figure out." He cut me off with a sharp motion of his hand. "This is not about what you need," he said. "This is about the family. This is about the company. We are in a delicate position right now. We have investors watching every move. I cannot have a scandal. I cannot have you dragging your mess through this town." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. Next to it lay a check. The check was for $50,000. The paper was a document, thick with paragraphs I could not focus on because my eyes were full of tears. "Sign it," he said. "Take the money. Go to Europe. Go to California. I don't care where you go. Piper, but you cannot stay here." I looked at the document. I saw words like severance and termination of rights and confidentiality. "You want to pay me to leave?" I asked. "I am protecting the family." He repeated, "You have made choices that have consequences." I looked at the check. $50,000. It was a lot of money to a terrified 25-year-old. It was enough to start over, but the price was my dignity. The price was agreeing that I was a mistake that needed to be erased. I did not touch the check. I did not touch the pen. I looked at my father, really looked at him. For the first time, I saw the fear behind his eyes. He wasn't just disappointed. He was scared. But I didn't know why. I turned around and walked out. I didn't take a coat. I didn't say goodbye to my stepmother, Corinne, who I knew was listening from the top of the stairs. I walked out the front door, got into my used sedan, and drove until the gaslight came on. That was the last time I saw him. Now, sitting in my quiet kitchen in Pennsylvania, I smoothed the letter flat. My father, the great Everett Morgan, was in trouble. The company he had sacrificed his own daughter to protect was failing. I checked the time. Leah would be out of school in 3 hours. I had work to do, but I couldn't focus on logistics. I needed to understand what I was looking at. I drove to a local credit union 2 towns over. I didn't use a big bank. I preferred the credit union because they knew my name and they didn't charge me fees for breathing. I had an appointment with Mr. Henderson, a senior advisor who had helped me set up my retirement accounts when I first started making decent money. Mr. Henderson was a man who looked like he was made of tweed and patience. He welcomed me into his office and offered me a peppermint. "Piper," he said, "good to see you. How is the college fund looking?" "It is on track," I said, "but that is not why I'm here today." I placed the letter on his desk. "I need you to explain this to me," I said, "not the legal part, the financial part. What does it mean when a loan like this is being shopped around?" Mr. Henderson put on his reading glasses. He took a long time to read the document. When he looked up, his expression was serious. "It means the borrower is in default, or close to it," he said. "The primary lender wants out. They are trying to recoup whatever cents on the dollar they can get before the whole thing goes belly up." "Can anyone buy it?" I asked. He tilted his head. "Theoretically? Yes. Distressed debt is a market just like any other. Usually, it is hedge funds or vulture capitalists who buy these things. They buy the debt for pennies. Then they squeeze the borrower for the full amount, or they force a bankruptcy to liquidate the assets." I nodded slowly. "So, if someone bought this debt, they would essentially own the leverage over the company?" Mr. Henderson took off his glasses. "Piper, why are you asking?" I took a breath. "This is my father's company." He raised an eyebrow. "I thought you said your family was distant." "They are," I said. "That is why I'm asking." I leaned forward. "I have some savings," I said, "and I have that aggressive investment account we set up 5 years ago. The one with the tech windfall." Mr. Henderson frowned. "That is your nest egg. Piper, that is your security." "I know." I said, "But tell me, do I have enough to be a player in this?" He tapped his calculator. He looked at the numbers on the letter again. "It depends on how desperate the bank is," he said. "If this is a distressed asset, it might be selling for 30 cents on the dollar. Maybe less." He wrote a number on a piece of paper and slid it to me. I looked at it. It was a high number, more than I had ever spent on anything, including my house, but it was a number I could reach, just barely. "It is risky. Piper," he warned, "you could lose it all. If the company has no assets, you are buying air." "I am not buying air," I said quietly. "I am buying a seat at the table." I left his office with my heart hammering against my ribs. I wasn't sure if I was going to do it. It seemed insane. I was a single mother with a 401k and a Honda. I was not a corporate raider. But then I picked up Leo from school. He climbed into the car, his knees covered in grass stains, clutching a drawing he had made in art class. "Look, Mom," he said, "it is a family tree." I froze. I looked at the paper. He had drawn a stick figure for me and a stick figure for himself. Above my head, there were 2 empty branches. "Mrs. Gable said everyone has grandparents," Leo said, looking at me with those wide, trusting eyes. "She said I could ask you about them." "Do I have a grandpa?" I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. "Yes, Leo," I said, my voice steady. "You have a grandfather. Is he nice?" Leo asked. "He is complicated," I said. "Why don't we see him?" "Because he lives far away." I lied. "And he is very busy." Leo seemed satisfied with that, turning his attention to a snack I had packed, but I wasn't satisfied. I felt a hot, sharp anger rising in my throat. My father had made me a liar. He had forced me to hide my son's history from him. He had made me ashamed of where I came from. I was done hiding. That night, after I tucked Leo into bed and read him 2 chapters of a story about a dragon who just wanted to bake bread, I went downstairs and opened my laptop. I poured myself a glass of water. I didn't drink alcohol. I needed to be sharp. I started typing. Morgan Industrial Supply, Halston, Maryland. The search results were a mix of old news and new lies. There was a feature in the Halston Gazette from 3 months ago. A photo of my father, looking older, his hair completely white now, standing next to the mayor. The headline read, "Local pillar Everett Morgan vows to keep jobs in Halston." The article was glowing. It talked about how Morgan Industrial was a family legacy, how Everett was fighting against the tide of outsourcing. Then I went deeper. I went to the forums. I went to the employee reviews on job sites. Anonymous user. "Paychecks are late again. Warehouse morale is 0. Layoffs every Friday." Anonymous user. "Management has no clue. They are bleeding money. The new CFO is a joke." Anonymous user. "If you get a job offer here, run." I cross-referenced the dates. The glowing article was published the same week. 3 reviews mentioned mass firings. My father was performing. He was playing the role of the benevolent patriarch while the walls were rotting from the inside out. I pulled up the public court records for Halston County. I wanted to see who was suing him. There were liens. There were disputes with vendors. And there was that name again, Greer and Klein Legal Group. They were listed as counsel for Morgan Industrial in almost every filing for the last 5 years. I clicked on the profile for the lead attorney, Miles Klein. His photo on the firm's website was polished to a high sheen. He was handsome in a way that made you check your wallet. 30-something, sharp jaw, eyes that looked like they were calculating your net worth while shaking your hand. His bio bragged about his expertise in corporate restructuring and crisis management. I didn't know him. I had never met him. When I lived in Halston, our family lawyer was a man named Old Mr. Abernathy, who smelled like pipe tobacco and gave me hard candies. Miles Klein was a different species. I started digging through the older filings, looking for when the switch happened. When did Old Mr. Abernathy get pushed out? When did Miles Klein take the wheel? I found a document from 7 years ago. It was a modification to the company's incorporation papers, a boring administrative filing. I almost scrolled past it, but then I saw the date. It was dated 2 weeks before the day my father kicked me out. I zoomed in on the signature page. There was my father's signature, loops and sharp angles. And there, in the witness line, was a signature I now recognized. Miles Klein. My breath caught. Miles Klein hadn't just appeared recently to clean up the mess. He had been there at the beginning. He had been there when I was pregnant. He had been there when the decision was made to cut me loose. I sat back, the screen glowing in the dark kitchen. I had always thought my exile was my father's idea. I thought it was his pride, his old-fashioned shame. But what if it wasn't? What if he had been coached? I remembered the document my father had tried to make me sign, the one with the confession-shaped clauses. It hadn't sounded like my father. My father was blunt, but he wasn't a lawyer. He spoke in commands, not in liability waivers. Someone else had written that document. Miles Klein. I felt a shift inside me. It wasn't rage. Rage is hot and burns out fast. This was something colder. It was the feeling of a lock clicking into place. I wasn't just a discarded daughter anymore. I was a woman who knew how to read the fine print. I looked at the certified letter on the counter again. They wanted to know if I had an interest. I opened my email. I drafted a message to Mr. Henderson at the credit union. Subject: the Morgan asset, Mr. Henderson. Please proceed with the inquiry. I want to request the full loan packet for the Morgan Industrial Supply debt. I want to see the assignment history, the covenant breaches, and the guarantees. I want to see everything. I am not just interested, I am a buyer. I hovered my finger over the send button. This was dangerous. I knew that. If I did this, I was inviting the chaos back into my life. I was inviting my father, my stepmother, and this shark named Miles Klein back into my world. But then I thought about Leo's drawing. I thought about the 2 empty branches on his family tree. I wasn't doing this for revenge. Revenge is for children who throw tantrums. I was doing this for the truth. I hit send. The screen blinked, sending the message into the void. I closed the laptop. The house was quiet. Upstairs, my son was sleeping, safe and warm. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The streetlights were humming. I was going to Halston, but this time, I wasn't going to be the girl who ran away in the rain. I was going to be the one holding the umbrella. And the banknote. I went upstairs to check on Leo one last time. I smoothed the hair back from his forehead. He looked so much like me, and in the curve of his chin. He looked a little like my father. I would not let that legacy crush him. I went to my own room and opened the bottom drawer of my dresser. Underneath a stack of sweaters, I kept a small box. Inside was a photo of me and my father, taken at my high school graduation. We looked happy. He looked proud. I turned the photo over, on the back, in his handwriting. It said, "To Piper, the future is yours." I put the photo back in the box and closed the drawer. He was right. The future was mine. And starting tomorrow, I was going to buy his past. I slept better that night than I had in 7 years. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. I made coffee. I made Leo's lunch. I packed my bag for work. I felt different. My clothes felt different on my skin. I drove Leo to school. "Have a good day, buddy," I said as he climbed out. "You too, Mom," he said. I watched him walk into the brick building. I watched until the heavy doors closed behind him. Then I drove to my office. I had a conference call at 10 regarding a shipment of steel beams from Ohio. I had a performance review with one of my junior dispatchers at noon. I was Piper Morgan, logistics manager. I was reliable. I was steady. But under the surface, the gears were turning. At 2 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was an encrypted email from Mr. Henderson. "Piper, the request is in." The broker was surprised. "But they are sending the packet. It is a lot of paperwork. Are you sure you want to do this?" I typed back one word. "Yes." A few minutes later, a large file landed in my inbox. "Confidential. Loan docs, Miss." I opened the first PDF. It was a treasure map of bad decisions. I saw the original loan amount, $4 million. I saw the interest rate, prime plus 5, predatory. I saw the collateral, the warehouse, the inventory, and my father's personal residence. He had bet the house with the pillars. I scrolled down to the signature page of the latest modification agreement. There was my father's signature. It looked shaky, weaker than I remembered, and there was the witness, Corinne Morgan, my stepmother. I stared at her name. Corinne had never been involved in the business. She was a woman who lunched. She was a woman who worried about the color of the curtains in the guest room. Why was she signing loan modifications? I kept scrolling. I found a clause on page 42. Management fee subordination. It listed a separate entity that was receiving management fees from the company. Fees that were being paid even while the loan was in default. GK Consulting Services. GK. Greer and Klein. Miles Klein wasn't just the lawyer. He was getting paid a management fee. He was bleeding the company dry while representing it. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just incompetence. This was a setup. My father wasn't just failing. He was being eaten alive, and he probably didn't even know it. I closed the file. I had seen enough. I wasn't just buying debt anymore. I was buying a crime scene. I picked up my phone and called Mr. Henderson. "Get the paperwork ready." I said, "I want to make an offer." "But Piper," he said, "you haven't even seen the appraisal." "I don't need the appraisal." I said, "I know exactly what it's worth." I hung up. I looked out the window of my office. The sky was gray, threatening rain. I thought about the last thing my father said to me. I am protecting the family. He had failed. Now it was my turn. I turned back to my computer and opened a new document. I typed a new header. Morgan River Holdings, LLC. It was time to go to work. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of routine tasks, but my mind was 300 miles away. I was already planning the trip. I would need a cover story for Leo, a work conference. It wasn't a lie. This was work, the hardest work I would ever do. I would need to find someone to watch him. My friend Sarah lived 2 streets over. She had a son Leo's age. She would help. I was arranging the pieces on the board. For 7 years, I had been the pawn, the piece that was sacrificed to save the king. But pawns, if they make it across the board, can become queens. And the queen is the most powerful piece in the game. I packed up my desk at 5 o'clock sharp. I walked out to my car. The wind had picked up. It whipped my hair across my face. I got into the car and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked the same as I had that morning. Same brown eyes, same determined mouth, but the fear was gone. I wasn't afraid of Halston anymore. I started the engine. I was coming home. Halston, Maryland, had not changed in 7 years. It was I who had changed. I drove my rental car, a silver sedan that smelled faintly of industrial cleaner, past the welcome sign on Route 40. The sign still boasted about the Rotary Club and the high school football state champions from 1998. The trees lining the highway were turning the color of rust and dried blood, shedding their leaves onto the wet asphalt. To my son, Leo, and my friend Sarah back in Pennsylvania, I was on a logistics conference. A boring few days of supply chain seminars and networking drinks. It was the kind of lie that protected itself, because no one asked follow-up questions about freight logistics unless they had to. But my hands were sweating on the steering wheel. I checked into a chain hotel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where business travelers stayed to avoid the downtown rates. The room was beige and anonymous. I unpacked my suit, my armor, and set up my laptop. I had an appointment in 2 hours. I was not meeting my father. I was meeting a man named Elias Thorne. Elias was a debt broker. In the polite world of finance, they called themselves asset recovery specialists. In the real world, they were the people who bought the wreckage of failed dreams and sold it for parts. Mr. Henderson, my credit union advisor, had found him for me. He came with a reputation for discretion. We met at a coffee shop 3 towns over, in a strip mall that had seen better days. I chose the location. I did not want anyone in Halston seeing me. Elias was a small man with glasses that were constantly sliding down his nose. He looked like a high school geography teacher, not a shark. He had a file on the table in front of him. "Ms. Morgan?" he asked as I sat down. Please, I said, just Piper. He nodded and tapped the file. I have the preliminary packet you asked for. The debt on Morgan Industrial Supply is interesting. Interesting is a polite word for a disaster. I said. Elias smiled. A thin expression that didn't reach his eyes. It is fractured. You have the primary lien holder, which is the regional bank. They are tired. They want out. They have classified the loan as non-performing for 6 months. They are ready to sell the note at a discount just to get it off their books. I nodded. I expected that. Then you have the mezzanine debt. Elias continued. Higher interest, unsecured. That is held by a group of investors out of Delaware. They are noisy, but they are not the problem. What is the problem? I asked. Elias flipped a page. He slid a sheet of paper toward me. The personal guarantee, he said, and the private lender holding the bridge loan. I looked at the numbers. They were staggering. $200,000 in high-interest bridge financing, taken out only 8 months ago. Who holds this? I asked. A company called Zenith Capital. Elias said. They are aggressive. They have a history of forcing liquidation. They do not want the business to survive. Piper, they want the real estate. The warehouse sits on 5 acres of prime commercial land near the highway. That is what they are after. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. My father wasn't just losing money. He was being hunted for his land. I want to buy it all. I said, the banknote, the mezzanine piece, and the bridge loan. Elias pushed his glasses up. The bridge loan will be expensive. Zenith knows what they have. I have the capital, I said, keeping my voice flat. But I have conditions. Name them. Anonymity. I said, absolute anonymity. You are the face of this purchase. My name does not appear on any correspondence until the ink is dry, and no intimidation. I know how these transfers usually go. I do not want anyone harassing the debtor. No phone calls at home, no showing up at the office. We do this by the book. Elias looked at me curiously. You are protecting him, he said, even though you are buying the knife at his throat. I am not protecting him. I said, standing up, I am managing the transition. There is a difference. The next day, I needed to see him. I knew my father's schedule. He was a creature of habit. On the first Wednesday of the month, the Halston Chamber of Commerce held a luncheon at the Grand Hotel downtown. My father had not missed a meeting in 30 years. I dressed carefully, a navy blazer, dark slacks, hair pulled back tight. I looked like any other corporate attendee. I slipped into the ballroom just as the salads were being served and found a spot near the back. Standing by the water station, the room was filled with the low roar of 200 people making small talk. I scanned the tables. It took me a moment to find him. Everett Morgan sat at table 4, near the front. He was wearing his favorite blue tie. My breath caught in my throat. He looked smaller. That was the first thing I noticed. His suit jacket seemed to hang loosely on his shoulders, as if he had shrunk inside it. His hair, once a steel gray, was completely white. I watched him. He was talking to the man next to him, laughing at a joke, but the laugh didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were darting around the room, scanning the exits, scanning the faces. He looked like a man who was waiting for the police to walk through the door. He picked up his water glass, and I saw his hand tremble. Just a slight tremor, but from 20 feet away, it looked like an earthquake. He was terrified. The great Everett Morgan, the man who had banished his pregnant daughter to save his reputation, was terrified. I felt a surge of pity, followed immediately by a wave of anger. He was performing. He was pretending everything was fine while his employees were wondering if their paychecks would clear. I stayed for 10 minutes. I didn't approach him. I couldn't. If he saw me now, the shock might kill him, or worse, he might try to hug me and pretend the last 7 years hadn't happened, and I wasn't ready to let him pretend. I slipped out before the keynote speaker started. Back in the hotel room, I dove into the documents Elias had given me. I needed to understand Zenith Capital. Who were they? Why were they targeting a mid-sized industrial supply company in Maryland? I followed the paper trail. It was a maze of shell companies and registered agents. Zenith Capital was owned by a holding company in Nevada. That holding company was managed by a trust services firm in Delaware. I spent 3 hours searching public records, cross-referencing names on business licenses, and then I found it. A filing for the Delaware Trust Services firm listed a managing member on an old annual report from 3 years ago, Garrison Ridley. The name sounded familiar. I closed my eyes, digging through the archives of my childhood memories. Garrison Ridley, Uncle Gary. He wasn't my uncle. He was Corinne's brother, my stepmother's younger brother. I sat back in the uncomfortable hotel chair, the blood draining from my face. Zenith Capital, the predatory lender that was squeezing my father, the one that wanted to liquidate the company for the land, was connected to my stepmother's brother. It was a setup. Corinne wasn't just watching the ship sink. She was helping drill the holes. I thought about the signature I had seen on the loan modification. Corinne's signature. She had facilitated this. She had brought the wolf to the door and told my father it was a house pet. Why? Money, obviously. If the company went under and the land was sold, Zenith would make a fortune. And if Zenith was connected to her brother, that money would find its way back to her. My father was being cannibalized by his own wife. I needed air. The hotel room suddenly felt like a cage. I drove to the county courthouse. I needed to pull the original incorporation papers for Zenith Capital. Just to be sure, I needed a physical copy with a wet signature, not just a digital scan. The courthouse hallway was cool and echoed with the sound of hard-soled shoes on marble. I walked toward the clerk's office, my head down, reviewing my list of document request numbers. I turned a corner and collided with a man coming out of courtroom B. "Oh, pardon me," he said, reaching out to steady my arm. The voice was smooth, like expensive bourbon. I looked up. It was him, Miles Klein. He looked exactly like his photo, only sharper. His suit was tailored to within an inch of its life. He smelled of sandalwood and confidence. I pulled my arm back as if I had been burned. "Excuse me," I said, stepping around him. He didn't move. He stood in my path, not aggressively, but with a polite obstruction that forced me to stop. He tilted his head, his eyes locking onto mine. They were gray, intelligent, and completely empty of warmth. "Piper Morgan," he said. It wasn't a question. My heart hammered against my ribs. I hadn't introduced myself. I hadn't been in this town for 7 years. "I didn't think you would remember me," I said, keeping my voice icy. "We never met." "No," he said, smiling slightly. "We never met. But I have an excellent memory for names and faces, especially when they belong to significant files." Significant files. That was what I was to him. A file. A loose end. "What brings you back to Halston?" he asked. His tone was casual, chatty even. "Visiting family? I am here on business," I said. He glanced down at the visitor badge clipped to my lapel. He saw my signature. He saw the sharp, angular way I wrote my name now. So different from the loopy script of a 25-year-old. "Business," he repeated. "Well, I suppose the logistics industry keeps you busy." He knew my job. He had researched me. I stared at him. "You are remarkably well informed, Mr. Klein. It is part of the job." "Piper. Can I call you Piper?" "No," I said. He chuckled. A dry sound. "Fair enough. Ms. Morgan, look, seeing as we are standing here, let me offer you a piece of free legal advice, not as counsel, just as a neighbor." I waited. "Halston is a small town," he said, his voice lowering. "Memories are long here. Sometimes. When people come back, they try to open old boxes. They try to understand things that are best left in the dark. It usually ends up being very painful. For everyone." I narrowed my eyes. "Is that a threat?" "Goodness, no," he said, placing a hand on his chest. "It is a kindness. Your father is a proud man. He is going through a difficult transition. I would hate to see his stress compounded by family drama. He wasn't protecting my father. He was protecting his leverage. He knew that if I started digging, I might find the bodies he had buried. I appreciate the concern." I said, But I'm not here for drama. I am here for facts. His smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. Facts can be slippery things. Ms. Morgan, be careful you don't slip on one. He stepped aside then, giving me just enough room to pass. Have a pleasant trip, he said. I walked to the clerk's office without looking back. My legs felt heavy. He knew I was here. He knew what I was doing, or at least, he suspected. I got the documents I needed, but I needed more. I needed someone who knew the internal workings of the company from before the collapse began. I needed Mrs. Higgins. Edith Higgins had been the head accountant at Morgan Industrial for 20 years. She had given me candy when I visited the office as a child. She had retired abruptly 3 years ago. I found her number in the phone book. She lived in a small bungalow on the north side of town. I called her from the car. Mrs. Higgins? It is Piper Morgan. There was a long silence on the line. Piper? Came the shaky voice. Oh, my stars. Piper. I met her at a diner near her house. She looked frail, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. You look just like your mother, she said. We talked about small things for a while. The weather, Leo. I showed her a picture of him on my phone. He is beautiful, she whispered. Does Everett know? No, I said. And he won't. Not yet. I leaned in. Mrs. Higgins, I need to ask you something. When you left the company, why did you leave? She looked down at her tea. It was time. Piper, I was getting old. No, I said gently. You love that job. You love the numbers. Something happened. She hesitated. She looked around the diner, checking for eavesdroppers. It changed. Piper, after you left, the air changed. Tell me. I said. She took a deep breath. A few months after you went away, there was a meeting. Mr. Klein was there, and your stepmother, and a man I didn't know. They were talking about a restructuring. What kind of restructuring? Financial engineering. Mr. Klein called it, she said, spitting the words out like they tasted bad. They wanted to move assets around. They wanted to create losses on paper to offset gains elsewhere. It was all technically legal, I suppose, but it felt wrong. Did my father agree to it? She sighed. He was distracted. Piper, he was so worried about some scandal. Mr. Klein kept telling him that they needed to lock things down, that they needed to protect the assets from potential liabilities. What liabilities? I asked. Mrs. Higgins looked at me sadly. You, honey, they were talking about you. Me? Mr. Klein said that if you ever came back, or if anyone ever found out the details of why you left, it could be used against the company. He convinced your father that they needed to bury everything under layers of legal protection. I felt a chill. They hadn't just kicked me out. They had built a fortress to keep me out. Mrs. Higgins lowered her voice further. But there was something else. A deal. What deal? I saw a memo once. I wasn't supposed to see it. It was about a settlement. A paternity issue. My heart stopped. A paternity issue? Not yours, she said quickly. Years ago, before you were born, or around that time, there was a claim against your father. A woman claimed she had a child by him. I stared at her. I had never heard this. It went away. She said, paid off, I assume. But Mr. Klein brought it up in that meeting. He said, we cannot have another claimant scenario. We cannot have Piper's situation trigger a review of the estate. The realization hit me like a slap. My pregnancy. My father hadn't kicked me out because he was morally offended. He hadn't kicked me out because he was ashamed of an unwed daughter. He had kicked me out because my pregnancy terrified him. He thought that if I had a child, and there was a scandal, it might dig up this old skeleton. He thought my illegitimate child would remind people of his own past indiscretions. It was fear, pure, selfish fear of exposure. And Miles Klein had weaponized that fear. He had used it to manipulate my father into signing over control, into trusting Corinne, into taking on debt he didn't understand. Thank you, Mrs. Higgins, I said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. You have no idea how much this helps. I left the diner with my mind racing. I went back to the hotel and opened my laptop. I pulled up the digital file of the severance agreement my father had tried to make me sign that night, the one I had refused to read. I had found a scanned copy in the discovery packet from the courthouse. It had been filed as an unsigned draft in the corporate records. Listed under potential liabilities, Miles Klein really did keep everything. I read it slowly this time. Clause 4. The beneficiary, Piper Morgan, acknowledges that her current condition is the result of reckless behavior and agrees to waive all future claims to family trusts in exchange for this one-time payment. Clause 7. The beneficiary agrees to undergo psychological evaluation and attests that she has a history of emotional instability. I stared at the words. Emotional instability. If I had signed this, if I had taken that $50,000, I would have signed a legal confession that I was unstable. They could have used this against me forever. If I ever tried to fight for custody of my child, here is a document where she admits she is crazy. If I ever tried to claim an inheritance, here is a document where she waives her rights. It wasn't a severance, it was a castration. And my father had handed me the pen. I closed the laptop. I felt sick, but I also felt clarity. My father was a weak man. He had let these wolves into the house because he was afraid of his own shadow. But I wasn't weak, and I wasn't afraid. I picked up my phone and called Arthur. Arthur was my former boss at a logistics firm in Philly. He was a quiet man, a widower who had invested well in the 90s and lived simply. He had always believed in me. When I told him I needed a partner for a business venture, he hadn't asked for a business plan. He had asked for a character reference. I told him to look at how I raised my son. He wrote the check the next day. Arthur, I said, I am ready to move. Are the numbers solid? He asked. His voice was calm, grounding. The numbers are terrible. I said, the company is bleeding. The assets are over-leveraged, and there is fraud involved. And you want to buy it? Yes. Why? Because I can fix it. I said, and because if I don't, good people are going to lose their livelihoods, and a bad man is going to win. That is good enough for me, Arthur said. Wire instructions? I gave him the account number for the new entity I had formed that morning. Morgan River Holdings, LLC, a neutral name, a name that sounded like a landscape, not a person. I initiated the transfer of my own funds, my life savings, the money I had scraped together for 7 years. It was everything I had. If this failed, I would be broke. I would have to explain to Leo why we couldn't go to the beach next summer. But if I didn't do this, I would be bankrupt in a way that money couldn't fix. I authorized the transaction. $1,200,000. It wasn't enough to pay off the debt, but it was enough to buy the controlling tranche. It was enough to become the captain of the sinking ship. I called Elias, the broker. Make the offer. I said, full price for the senior note, and 50 cents on the dollar for the mezzanine. And Zenith? Elias asked. The private lender? Leave them for now. I said, I will deal with them later. Once I own the house, I can deal with the termites. One more thing, Elias said. What is the strategy? Do we liquidate? Do we strip the assets? No, I said firmly. We restructure. We keep the doors open. We protect the payroll. That is not the most profitable path. Piper, I am not looking for profit. Elias, I am looking for closure. I hung up the phone. I walked to the window of the hotel room. The sun was setting over Halston. I could see the silhouette of the water tower in the distance. I owned my father's debt. Technically, I owned him. The power of it was dizzying. I could walk into his office tomorrow and fire him. I could evict him from his house. I could do to him exactly what he had done to me. I imagined it. I imagined the look on his face, but then I thought of Leo. I thought of the way he shared his toys. I thought of the man I wanted him to be. I wouldn't destroy my father. That was what Miles Klein would do. That was what Corinne would do. I would save him, but I would save him on my terms. I opened a fresh email to Elias. Subject: Terms of restructuring once the purchase is confirmed. Issue a notice to the borrower, Morgan Industrial Supply. We will grant a forbearance on the default. We will inject emergency capital to cover payroll. But we require two things immediately. 1. Full transparency of all financial records for the last 7 years, specifically regarding payments to GK Consulting and Zenith Capital. 2. An in-person meeting with the CEO, Everett Morgan. Attendance is mandatory. The meeting will take place at a neutral location. No lawyers allowed. I hit send. The trap was set. But it wasn't a trap to kill the animal. It was a trap to catch it, so the wound could be cleaned. I sat down on the edge of the bed. My hands were finally steady. I was the liability. That's what he had called me. Well, he was right. I was a liability. I was a liability to his lies. I was a liability to his lawyer's schemes. I was a liability to his wife's greed. And liabilities, if you don't manage them, have a way of becoming the boss. I packed my bag. I was going back to Pennsylvania for the weekend. I needed to hug my son. I needed to wash the smell of this town off my skin. But I would be back. And when I returned, I wouldn't be hiding in the back of the room. I would be sitting at the head of the table. The wire transfer confirmation appeared on my laptop screen as a simple green checkmark. It was anticlimactic. There were no fireworks, no ominous music, just a string of pixels indicating that Morgan River Holdings, LLC, now owned the primary debt of Morgan Industrial Supply. I sat in my home office in Pennsylvania, the silence of the house wrapping around me. My son, Leo, was at school. The dishwasher was humming downstairs. To the rest of the world, I was just a mother catching up on emails. But in the invisible ledger of Halston, Maryland, I had just become the most dangerous person in my father's life. I owned the note. I owned the leverage. Technically, I could have foreclosed that afternoon. I could have sent the sheriffs to padlock the warehouse doors. The power was intoxicating, a cold, heavy weight in my chest. But I did not move. I watched the screen, waiting for the ripples to reach the shore. It took less than 3 hours. My burner phone, the one listed as the contact number for Morgan River Holdings, buzzed against the desk. I stared at it. I had expected a call from a lawyer, or perhaps from my father himself, but the caller ID displayed the main switchboard number for the company. I put on my headset. I took a sip of water to clear my throat. I had practiced a voice that was not my own, lower, flatter, stripped of the cadence of the girl who used to run through those hallways. Morgan River Holdings. I answered, "This is the account manager." There was a pause on the other line. Then, a woman's voice, breathless and high-pitched with panic. "Hello? Yes. My name is Brenda Miller. I am the office manager at Morgan Industrial Supply. I was told to call this number regarding the notice we just received." Brenda. I closed my eyes. I knew Brenda. She had been the receptionist when I was in high school. She used to keep a jar of peanut butter pretzels on her desk. She had knit me a scarf when I went away to college. "Ms. Miller," I said, keeping my tone professional and detached. "We have acquired the senior debt facility. I assume you are calling regarding the assignment notice?" "Yes," she said. She sounded like she was crying. "Look, I don't know how this works. I don't know who you people are. Mr. Morgan is indisposed right now, but I need to know. Need to know what? Mrs. Miller? Payroll is Friday," she said. Her voice cracked. "We have 42 people on the floor. If you freeze the accounts, if you lock us out, checks will bounce. These people live paycheck to paycheck. Please, I just need to know if I should tell them to go home." My hand gripped the edge of the desk until my knuckles turned white. This was the part of revenge that no one talks about, the collateral damage. If I squeezed my father, I squeezed Brenda. I squeezed the forklift drivers. I squeezed the guys on the loading dock who had nothing to do with my exile. I looked at the picture of Leo on my desk. I was doing this for him, to break the cycle of fear. Creating more fear would not help. Morgan River Holdings is not looking to disrupt operations. I said. There was a silence, as if she hadn't expected mercy. "What?" she asked. "We are not liquidating." I said, "Not today." Go ahead and process payroll. Ms. Miller, the accounts will remain open. Oh, thank God, she whispered. Thank you. You have no idea. It has been a nightmare here. Mr. Morgan is... She stopped herself. Loyalty was a hard habit to break. Mr. Morgan is what? I asked. He is not himself, she said quietly. He is scared. And Mrs. Morgan, well, she has been in the office every day. She is handling the money decisions now. Corinne, the confirmation hit me like a physical blow. My stepmother, who used to claim that business bored her, was now controlling the cash flow. We will be in touch regarding the restructuring. I said, do not worry about Friday. Ms. Miller. I hung up. My hands were shaking. I had bought the debt to get control, but hearing Brenda's panic made me realize how close the company was to the edge. It wasn't just sinking, it was plummeting. I needed to see it for myself. I couldn't rely on phone calls and spreadsheets. I needed eyes on the ground. 2 days later, I drove back to Maryland. I didn't go to the office. I went to a small row house in the working-class district of Halston, near the old rail yard. I parked down the street and walked up the cracked sidewalk. It was 7 in the evening. The blue flicker of televisions glowed in the windows. I knocked on the door of number 412. It opened a moment later. A man stood there in a flannel shirt and work boots, holding a half-eaten sandwich. He was 60, maybe older, with a face weathered by wind and diesel fumes. Sam? I said. He squinted at me. The porch light was dim. Yeah? Who's asking? It is Piper, I said. Piper Morgan. He froze. The sandwich lowered slowly. He leaned forward, peering at me. Little Piper? He rasped. It's me. Sam. Sam operated the heavy cranes in the yard. When I was a teenager, avoiding the tension at home, I used to hide in the break room. Sam would sneak me vending machine crackers and tell me stories about his time in the Merchant Marines. He was the one who taught me that respect is earned by how you treat the guy sweeping the floor, not the guy signing the checks. He opened the door wide. Get in here, girl, before someone sees you. His living room smelled of pot roast and old upholstery. It was warm and safe. I thought you were gone for good, he said, sitting down in his recliner. We heard you went to California, or maybe France. I didn't go that far, I said, sitting on the edge of the sofa. I have been nearby. He looked at me, his eyes shrewd. You look good. Piper, you look tough. I have to be. I said, Sam, I need to know what is happening at the yard. The real story, not what the newsletter says. Sam snorted. The newsletter? That is a joke. Piper, it is a mess. We are down to skeleton crews. Maintenance schedules are being ignored. That crane I run? It is 3 months overdue for a safety inspection. I told the foreman, and he told me to shut up and run it. And my father? Sam shook his head. The old man is a ghost. He walks through the yard sometimes, but he doesn't look at anybody. It is like he is sleepwalking. And who is giving the orders? The wife, Sam said, his face hardening. That woman, Corinne, she comes down in her Mercedes, wearing those fancy shoes, pointing at things she doesn't understand. She fired the inventory manager last week because he wouldn't sign off on a shipment that didn't exist. My ears perked up. A shipment that didn't exist? Phantom inventory. Sam said, they are cooking the books. Piper, trying to make the assets look higher so they can borrow more. Everyone knows it. We are just waiting for the padlock to go on the gate. I felt a surge of cold anger. Cooking the books wasn't just bad management. It was fraud. And if Corinne was directing it, she wasn't just incompetent. She was a criminal. Sam leaned forward. Why are you asking? Piper? You didn't come all this way just to catch up with an old grease monkey. I looked him in the eye. I am going to fix it. Sam, but I need you to trust me, and I need you to keep your head down. He studied my face for a long moment. Then he nodded. You were always the smart one, he said. Your dad never saw it. But we did. You were the only one who knew how the gears actually turned. I left Sam's house with a new piece of the puzzle. Phantom inventory. I went back to my hotel, and logged into the public records database again. I searched for Corinne's family. I knew about her brother, Garrison Ridley, the managing member of the trust that controlled the predatory lender, but I needed to link him to the daily operations. I dug into the vendor list Elias had provided in the loan packet. There was a recurring payment to a company called Ridley Logistics Solutions, $10,000 a month for consulting. I searched for Ridley Logistics Solutions. The address was a P.O. box in Delaware. I searched the Delaware Corporate Registry. The registered agent was a generic firm, but the annual report listed a single officer, Garrison Ridley. It was clumsy. They were so arrogant, so sure that no one would look, that they hadn't even bothered to hide the name properly. Corinne was paying her brother's shell company $10,000 a month from a dying business. She was siphoning cash while Brenda was crying about payroll. I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was Elias. "Piper," he said. "I just got a call from Greer & Klein. Miles Klein. What does he want?" I asked. "He wants a meeting with the principal of Morgan River Holdings. He says he has a buyer who is willing to take the note off our hands." "Already?" "He says his client is willing to pay a 15% premium on what we paid. It is a quick flip. Piper, a very fast, very easy profit." I laughed. But there was no humor in it. He is scared. Elias. He knows that whoever holds the debt holds the keys. He wants to control the note so he can control the foreclosure. "What should I tell him?" Elias asked. "Tell him the debt is not for sale." I said, "Tell him Morgan River is a long-term investor. We are interested in the underlying value of the business." He won't like that. I don't care what he likes. I hung up. Miles Klein was trying to buy me out because he needed to bury the evidence. If a stranger owned the debt, they might audit the books. They might find the phantom inventory and the payments to the brother-in-law. He needed a friendly executioner. I wasn't going to give him one. I sat in the dark hotel room, thinking about the past, thinking about why my father had been so susceptible to this manipulation. Sam had said Everett was a ghost. Mrs. Higgins had said he was terrified of a scandal. I opened the file on my laptop where I kept my notes. I looked at the timeline. 7 years ago. I got pregnant. I was unmarried. My boyfriend had left. It was a cliché, certainly, but hardly a tragedy in the 21st century. So why had my father reacted as if I had brought a plague into the house? "You are a liability." I went back to the legal search engine. I typed in my father's name. But this time, I set the date range back 30 years. I scrolled through the usual business lawsuits, slip and falls, contract disputes. Then I found it. Doe versus Morgan, filed 28 years ago. It was sealed, mostly, but the docket summary was visible. Petition for paternity and support. Motion to intervene in family trust. I read the summary 3 times. A woman had sued my father, claiming he was the father of her child. But she hadn't just asked for child support, she had gone after the ownership structure of the company. She had argued that her child was entitled to an equal share of the family trust that held the voting shares. The case was settled out of court. Dismissed with prejudice, that meant he paid her. He paid her a lot of money to go away. I sat back. That was the wound. My father had a secret child out there, or at least, the legal threat of one. When I got pregnant, unmarried and reckless, it wasn't just about me. In his mind, it was a recurrence of the nightmare. Corinne must have known. She must have whispered in his ear, "She is just like that woman. She will use the child to take the company. She will use the child to destroy the trust." Corinne had framed my pregnancy as a hostile takeover. She had convinced him that the only way to protect the brand and his own legacy was to cut me off, to force me to sign away my rights, to make me a stranger. It wasn't moral outrage. It was legal strategy, and Miles Klein had been the architect. I felt a sudden, crushing wave of grief. My father hadn't rejected me because he didn't love me. He rejected me because he was a coward who let his lawyer and his new wife convince him that I was an enemy. I needed to talk to someone, not a lawyer, not a broker. I opened my contact list and called Dr. Evans. She was a therapist I had started seeing 2 years ago. when Leo began asking questions about his grandfather, and I found myself having panic attacks in the grocery store. It was late, but she picked up. "Piper, is everything okay?" "I am in Halston," I said. Silence. Then, gently, "How does it feel?" "It feels like a crime scene," I said. "And I am the detective. Are you safe? Physically?" "Yes. Emotionally. I don't know. I found out why he did it. Dr. Evans. I found out why he kicked me out. I told her about the lawsuit. I told her about Corinne's theft. I told her about the power I now held. I could crush them. I said, I could walk in there tomorrow and blow the whole thing up. It would feel satisfying, would it?" "Doctor," Evans asked, "it would feel like justice. Justice is about restoring balance," she said. "Revenge is about transferring pain. You are carrying a lot of pain. Piper, if you just transfer it back to him, will that make you feel safe? Will that make Leo's future secure?" I looked at the reflection of my face in the dark window. "No," I said, "I don't want to be him. I don't want to be a person who destroys family for money or pride." "Then what is the goal?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "Safety," I said, "dignity. I want him to admit what he did, and I want to make sure they can never hurt me or my son again. Boundaries. Then keep your eyes on that. Doctor," Evans said, "use your power to build a wall, not a bomb." I hung up. A wall. I could build a wall. I opened my email and drafted a letter to Elias. Subject: Formal notice of restructuring offer to Greer and Klein, Counsel for Morgan Industrial Supply, from Morgan River Holdings, LLC. Notice of default and offer to cure. We are in possession of the senior debt. The borrower is in default. However, we are willing to restructure the loan and waive the penalties under the following conditions. 1. Immediate disclosure of all related party transactions for the past 5 years. 2. The immediate removal of Corinne Morgan from all financial decision-making and check-signing authority, pending a third-party audit. 3. An in-person meeting with Everett Morgan within 48 hours to sign the new term sheet. These terms are non-negotiable. It was a surgical strike. I wasn't firing my father. I was firing his wife. I was cutting the puppet strings. I sent the email. The response time would tell me everything. If Miles Klein was smart, he would know he was cornered. If he was arrogant, he would fight. I drove back to Pennsylvania the next morning. I needed to be at work. I needed to maintain the facade of my normal life. I walked into my office at the logistics firm at 8:30. My boss, David, was waiting by my desk. David was a good man, fair but strict. He looked uncomfortable. "Piper, can I see you in my office?" I followed him in. He closed the door. He didn't sit down. "We received a call this morning," he said, "and an email." My stomach dropped. "From who?" "It was anonymous," David said, "but it was detailed. It alleged that you have been using company resources to manage a private equity fund. It alleged that you are involved in financial misconduct regarding distressed assets." I stared at him. It was a lie. Mostly. I had used my own money. I had used my own time. Mostly. But the accusation was designed to sound like embezzlement. "David, that is ridiculous," I said, keeping my voice steady. "My personal investments are my own business. I have never used company funds. I know that." "Piper," David said, "I trust you. But the email came with attachments, bank records, LLC formations. It looks messy. Compliance is going to have to do a review." I felt the blood drain from my face. Miles Klein. He hadn't just rejected my offer. He had counterattacked. He had done a background check on me, found my employer, and launched a missile at my livelihood. He was trying to get me fired. He was trying to destabilize me financially so I would be forced to sell the debt. He was playing dirty. I looked at David. "I will cooperate fully with the review." I said, "You will find nothing improper. This is a personal matter, a family matter. Someone is trying to intimidate me." David nodded, but he looked worried. "Just handle it. Piper, I can't have drama in the logistics chain." I walked back to my desk. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from clarity. Miles Klein had made a mistake. He thought I was the same scared girl who had run away 7 years ago. He thought that if he threatened my job, I would fold. He didn't realize that by attacking my job, by attacking the stability I provided for my son, he had just given me permission to take the gloves off. He wanted a fight? I picked up my phone. I dialed Elias. Did they respond to the offer? I asked. Yes, Elias said. They rejected it. They said the conditions regarding Mrs. Morgan are unacceptable interference in internal governance, and they threatened to sue us for tortious interference. I looked at the picture of Leo. File the notice. I said, Which one? Elias asked. The acceleration clause. I said, Demand full payment of the entire $4 million immediately. Piper, that will force them into bankruptcy. No, I said, it will force them into a room with me. I hung up. I wasn't a liability anymore. I was the bill collector. And I was coming to collect. The conference room in Philadelphia was glass-walled and temperature-controlled, kept at a constant 68 degrees. I sat on one side of the mahogany table. Across from me sat David, my boss, and the director of human resources, a woman named Karen, who I had shared lunch with just last week. On the table between us sat a binder. It was 3 inches thick. Inside that binder was the anatomy of my financial life, every bank statement, every transfer, every LLC formation document, and a sworn affidavit from my accountant stating that not a single penny of company funds had ever touched my personal accounts. Karen looked uncomfortable. She kept clicking her pen. Piper, she said, we have reviewed the documentation you provided. It is thorough. It is complete. I corrected her. My voice was steady. I had spent the last 48 hours building this defense, sleeping in 2-hour shifts. While my friend Sarah watched Leo, I had not spiraled. I had not cried. 7 years ago, I would have fallen apart at the accusation. Today, I just built a paper trail. We can see that, David said. He looked relieved. The forensic accounting team has cleared the transactions. There is no evidence of embezzlement or misuse of company resources. I nodded once. So the anonymous tip was baseless. It was malicious. Karen said, the timing, the specific language used, it was designed to trigger an immediate suspension. Whoever sent this wanted you out of the building today. I knew exactly who wanted me out of the building. I reached out and placed my hand on the binder. I take my reputation very seriously, I said, and I take this company's integrity seriously. I am glad we have resolved this. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a supply chain to manage. I walked out of that room with my back straight. I went to my desk, answered 3 emails regarding a delayed shipment in heavy traffic, and then I went to the ladies' room. I locked the stall door. I leaned my forehead against the cool metal. I took 10 deep breaths, counting them down like a launch sequence. My hands were shaking so hard, I had to grip the toilet paper dispenser to steady them. They had tried to take my job. They had tried to take the food out of my son's mouth. Miles Klein. I washed my face with cold water. I reapplied my lipstick. I looked at the woman in the mirror. She looked like a logistics manager, but her eyes looked like a hunter's. I left the office at 5. I called the private investigator my attorney had recommended, a man who worked entirely in digital forensics. Did you trace it? I asked as I merged onto the highway. It was routed through 3 servers, he said. Smart. But not smart enough. The original IP resolves to a boutique PR firm in Baltimore called Apex Strategy. Who pays them? I asked. Their client list is private, he said, but I did a cross-reference on their principal consultant. He is Facebook friends with a man named Miles Klein, and Apex Strategy has received 5 payments from Greer and Klein Legal Group in the last year. They are listed as litigation support. Litigation support. That was a polite term for professional smearing. Thank you, I said. I hung up. Miles Klein was not just a lawyer. He was a strategist who destroyed reputations as a line item on a billing invoice. He hadn't just defended my father. He had actively tried to destroy me to protect his position. It was time to stop fighting through proxies. I drove home. I packed a bag. I told Leo I had another meeting. I kissed his forehead, smelling the shampoo in his hair, grounding myself in the reality of why I was doing this. I am doing this so you never have to be afraid of men in suits. I whispered. I drove south. I didn't call a lawyer. I called my father. I had the number for his direct line at the office, the one that bypassed Brenda at the front desk. It rang 4 times.
"Morgan," he answered. His voice sounded raspy, tired. "Hello?" "Dad," I said. There was a silence on the line so profound I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights in his office 300 miles away. "Piper?" he whispered. "Meet me," I said. "Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, the Starlight Diner on Route 15. Just you." "Piper, I can't just leave. We are in the middle of a crisis." "I know." I said, "I am the crisis. Be there, Dad, or I will have the sheriffs at your door by noon." I hung up before he could argue. The Starlight Diner was a chrome and neon relic that sat on the edge of the highway, halfway between Halston and the rest of the world. It was where we used to go for pancakes after my piano recitals, back when we were a family that did things like that. I arrived at 8:45. I took a booth in the back corner. I ordered black coffee. My father walked in at 9 sharp. He looked terrible. The suit I had seen him wearing at the chamber luncheon, the one that looked like armor, was gone. He was wearing a windbreaker and slacks that hadn't been pressed. His face was gray, the skin sagging around his jawline. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a month. He stood by the door for a moment, scanning the room. When he saw me, his shoulders dropped. He walked over and slid into the booth opposite me. He didn't take off his jacket. "Piper," he said. He reached across the table, as if to take my hand. I kept my hands wrapped around my coffee mug. I didn't pull away, but I didn't reach back. "Hello, Everett," I said. He flinched at the use of his first name. "You look good," he said. His eyes were wet. "You look like your mother." "Don't," I said. My voice was low and hard. "Do not do that. We are not here to reminisce. We are here to talk about the $4 million you owe." He blinked, confusion washing over his face. "What do you know about that?" he asked. "That is company business. How did you— Did Brenda call you?" "I told her not to call you. Brenda didn't tell me." I said, "I read the loan documents." He shook his head. "Piper, you don't understand. It is complicated. The market shifted. We had supply chain issues. The market didn't shift. Dad, you were looted." "I beg your pardon?" "You are paying consulting fees to companies that don't exist. You have inventory on the books that isn't in the warehouse. You are drowning in debt because you let people drill holes in the bottom of your boat." He straightened up, a flash of his old defensiveness appearing. "I have advisors," he said. "Competent people. Miles Klein is the best attorney in the county. Corinne has been working day and night to manage the cash flow." "Corinne," I said, saying the name like a curse word. "Corinne is paying her brother $10,000 a month while your warehouse workers are worried about their paychecks bouncing." He stared at me. "Her brother? Garrison? No. That is a legitimate logistics firm. It is a P.O. box in Delaware." I said, "I checked." He looked away, staring out the window at the passing trucks. His hand was trembling on the table. "I didn't know." He whispered, "You didn't want to know." I said, "Just like you didn't want to know me 7 years ago." He looked back at me, his eyes pleading. "Piper, I had to. You have to understand. I was protecting the family. Protecting the family." I repeated, "By kicking your pregnant daughter out onto the street? By trying to make me sign a confession that I was mentally unstable?" He looked shocked. I just wanted you to have a severance, to start over." I pulled a piece of paper from my bag. It was a copy of the affidavit. "Read it," I said. "Clause 7. Emotional instability." He picked up the paper. His eyes scanned the legal text. His face went pale. "I never read this part." He stammered. "Miles said it was standard language." "He said it was just to protect against future liability claims." "Standard language." I scoffed. "It was a trap. Dad, Miles wrote this. And you handed it to me.
He dropped the paper. He put his head in his hands. I was scared. "Piper," he said, his voice muffled. "You were so reckless. And with the baby coming, I thought it would ruin everything. I thought people would talk. You thought I was her." I said. He froze. He looked up slowly. "Who?" "The woman from 28 years ago." I said, "The one who sued you for paternity. The one who tried to touch the family trust." His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I know about the lawsuit. Dad, I know you settled. I know you were terrified that my illegitimate child would somehow reopen that door. That is why you did it. It wasn't about morality. It was about asset protection." He looked at me with a mixture of awe and horror. "You know everything," he whispered. "I do," I said. "And that brings us to why we are here." I leaned forward. "I didn't come here to get an apology. Dad, I know you don't have one to give. I came here to give you a choice." "A choice?" "The bank isn't holding your loan anymore," I said. "They sold it." "I know," he said miserably. "Some investment group, Morgan River Holdings. Miles says they are sharks. He says they are going to liquidate us. He wants me to sign a deal with Zenith Capital today to pay them off." "Don't sign with Zenith." I said. "Zenith is Corinne's brother." He looked confused. "What?" "Zenith Capital is the predatory lender. It is owned by the same people Corinne is paying the consulting fees to. If you sign with them, they will take the warehouse. Dad, they will take the land, and you will be left with nothing." He looked like he was going to be sick. "Then what do I do?" he asked. "Morgan River Holdings. They hold the note. If I don't pay them, they will foreclose." "I know." I said. "How do you know?" "Because I am Morgan River Holdings." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the table. Everett Morgan stared at me. He looked at my face, my cheap blazer, my hands resting on the formica. He tried to reconcile the daughter he had discarded with the entity that now owned his life. "You?" he breathed. "Me." I said, "I bought the debt. I used my savings. I used everything I have. You own the company?" "I own the mortgage," I said, "which means I own the leverage." He started to laugh. It was a jagged, hysterical sound. "You bought it, my little Piper. You bought the debt." Then his face twisted into anger. "Is this why you came back? To rub my face in it? To ruin me?" "I came back to save you," I snapped, my voice rising for the first time. "I came back because you are too blind to see that your wife and your lawyer are stripping you for parts." "I am not stripping him." The voice came from the front of the diner. I turned. Corinne was standing there. She was wearing a beige cashmere coat and oversized sunglasses. She looked like a movie star who had taken a wrong turn. She marched over to the table. She didn't look at me. She looked at Everett. "Everett, get up," she said. "We are leaving." "How did you find us?" I asked. She ignored me. "Everett, Miles is on the phone. He has the papers ready. We need to go." I looked at my father. He was looking back and forth between us, paralyzed. "Sit down." "Corinne," I said. She turned her sunglasses on me. "You?" she hissed. "You poisonous little girl. You come back here after 7 years. Stirring up trouble? Threatening your father?" "I am not threatening him." I said. "I am offering him a lifeline." I looked at Everett. "Here's the deal. Dad, I will restructure the loan. I will lower the interest rate. I will keep the warehouse open. I will save the jobs." Everett looked at me, hope flickering in his eyes. "You would do that?" "Yes," I said. "But here are the conditions." I pointed at Corinne. 1. She is removed from all financial authority immediately. 2. We bring in an independent forensic auditor to review every transaction for the last 5 years. 3. You fire Greer and Klein. Corinne gasped. "You can't do that. That is insane." "Everett, listen to her. She wants to humiliate us. She wants to put me in jail. Only if you did something illegal." "Corinne," I said calmly, "did you?" Her face went tight. She grabbed Everett's arm. "Everett, come with me right now. Miles has a deal with Zenith. They will pay off this Morgan River company. We will be free of her. Free? I asked. You will be owned by a shark who wants your real estate. And you know it. Corinne. Because the shark is your brother. She froze. The color drained from her cheeks under the heavy makeup. Everett looked at his wife. Is it true? He asked. Is Zenith? Is it Garrison? Corinne's eyes darted around. It is a family trust. Everett. It keeps the money in the family. It is smart business. Everett pulled his arm away from her. He looked at me. He looked at the daughter he had called a liability, and then his phone rang. It buzzed loudly on the table. The screen said, Miles Klein. Answer it, Corinne commanded. Everett picked up the phone. He put it on speaker. Everett? Miles's voice filled the booth. Smooth. Controlled. I am here. Miles, Everett said. Where are you? We are waiting at the office. The Zenith representative is here with the check. We need to sign before noon or the offer expires. Miles, Everett said, his voice shaking. Piper is here. There was a pause. Is she? Miles said. His tone shifted. It became colder. Don't listen to her. Everett, she is an adverse party. She is the hostile creditor. Anything she says is a negotiation tactic. She says she owns the debt. Miles, Everett said. She says she wants to restructure. She wants to control you. Miles said quickly, Listen to me, Everett. If you sign with her, you are admitting fault. You are opening yourself up to liability. She will use that audit to destroy your reputation. She will drag the family name through the mud. Remember the scandal we avoided? She will bring it all back. I saw the fear spike in my father's eyes. The old button. The scandal. Miles, I said, leaning toward the phone. This is Piper. I know you wrote the affidavit. Silence. I beg your pardon? Miles said. The affidavit from 7 years ago. The one with the emotional instability clause. You wrote it? You scripted the whole thing. Everett, hang up the phone. Miles ordered. His voice was sharp now. Piper Morgan is a liability. She is unstable. If you make a deal with her, you are signing your own death warrant. Come to the office, sign the Zenith deal, pay her off, and get her out of your life. It is the only way to be safe. Safe. My father looked at me. He looked at Corinne, who was nodding frantically. He was a man who had spent his whole life running from uncomfortable truths. He had built a wall of lies to feel safe. And I was asking him to tear down the wall. I was asking him to face the audit, to face the theft, to face me. It was too much for him. He stood up. I can't do it. Piper, he said, I can't have a scandal. I can't have the police involved. Dad, if you sign with Zenith, you lose everything. I said, but I will be safe, he muttered. Miles will handle it. He looked at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes, only shame. And shame is a powerful fuel for cowardice. I am sorry. Piper, he said. He turned and walked out of the diner. Corinne followed him, shooting me a look of pure, venomous triumph. I sat there. I watched them get into his car. I watched them drive away toward the highway. My hands were shaking. I felt a scream building in my throat, a scream of frustration and heartbreak. He had chosen the lie again. He had chosen the poison because it tasted sweet. But then I looked down at the documents on the table. He had made a mistake, a fatal mistake. I picked up my phone. I dialed Elias. Did he sign? Elias asked. He is going to... I said, he is going to sign with Zenith Capital. Okay, Elias said. So we get paid. We make a 15% profit and we walk away. It is a win. Piper, no. I said, it is not a win. I opened the loan agreement on my tablet. I scrolled to page 32. Covenant regarding further indebtedness. Elias, listen to me. The minute he signs that deal with Zenith, he is taking on new debt. Yes? The Morgan River loan agreement has a strict prohibition on secondary financing without our consent. I know, Elias said, but if he pays us off, he can't pay us off instantly. I said, the wire transfer takes 24 hours, but the signature happens now. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. The moment he puts pen to paper with Zenith, he is in material breach of my contract. And, Elias asked. And that triggers the acceleration clause, I said. It gives me the right to demand immediate possession of the collateral. You mean the warehouse? No, I said. The personal guarantee. I looked out the window at the empty parking spot where my father's car had been. He had bet the house with the pillars, the house where I grew up. Elias, I said, draft the notice. The moment the Zenith lien hits the public record, and Miles is fast, he will file it today. I want you to file a confession of judgment. Piper, Elias said, his voice warning. That is the nuclear option. You are going to take his house? He chose his lawyer. I said, now he has to live with the law. I stood up. I left a $20 bill on the table for the coffee I hadn't drunk. I wasn't the scared daughter anymore. I wasn't the victim. I walked out to my car. The wind was cold. My father had just signed a deal with the devil to get rid of me. But he forgot that I owned the hell he was living in. I drove toward the courthouse. If he wanted a legal fight, I would give him one. And I wouldn't use a lawyer like Miles Klein who hid behind whispers. I would use the truth. And the truth was a sledgehammer. I called my boss. David, I said, I am taking personal leave. Indefinite. Piper, is everything okay? No. I said, but it is going to be. I hung up. I was done hiding behind logistics. I was done hiding behind Morgan River Holdings. It was time for Piper Morgan to step into the light. The engine of my rental car was still warm when I parked outside the lawyer's office of Greer & Klein. I did not go inside. I did not need to. The war was no longer being fought in conference rooms. It was being fought on the digital ledger where ownership was defined. I had watched my father drive away from the diner to sign a deal with the devil. He thought he was saving his company. He thought he was buying safety. But he had just walked into a slaughterhouse. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over Elias's contact. Execute the option, I said the moment he answered. Piper, Elias said, his voice tight. The market closes in 10 minutes. If we move on the mezzanine slice now, we are tapping out your reserves. You will have nothing left for operations. Do it, I said. Buy the mezzanine debt. Buy the remaining 10% of the senior note. I want the entire capital stack. It is reckless. Piper, no, I said. Reckless is letting Miles Klein control the liquidation rights. If I own the mezzanine debt, I can block the Zenith deal from closing. I can invoke the change of control provision. There was a pause. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. I am putting the order in, Elias said. Transferring funds. I stared at the dashboard clock. 2 minutes passed, then 3. If Miles Klein had already filed the Zenith paperwork, I was too late. If the county clerk had stamped my father's signature on the new mortgage, I was just a minority creditor in a burning building. Done. Elias said, the trade cleared. Morgan River Holdings now owns 85% of the total debt obligations of Morgan Industrial Supply. I let out a breath I had been holding since the diner. Good, I said. Now send the email. Which one? The enforcement notice, I said, but attach the term sheet I drafted last night, the one with the payroll protection clause. I wanted to be clear. I was bringing the hammer down, but I was putting a pillow underneath it for the workers. I drove back to my hotel room. I needed to be stationary for what came next. The email went out at 4 p.m. It was a formal legal notice sent to Everett Morgan, Corinne Morgan, and Miles Klein. It stated that due to the attempted unauthorized financing with Zenith Capital, the borrower was in default. It stated that Morgan River Holdings was exercising its right to accelerate the loan, but then came the second page, notwithstanding the default. The lender agrees to a forbearance period of 30 days, provided that payroll is met and no assets are disposed of. The lender is prepared to capitalize a restructuring plan immediately, contingent on full transparency. I was offering a hand, not a fist. The reaction was immediate. My phone rang at 5. It was not my father. It was Brenda, the office manager. Ms. Morgan? She asked. She sounded breathless. Yes. Brenda, we just got an email. Mr. Klein is, well, he is yelling. He is in Mr. Morgan's office and he is yelling that the deal is dead. He says someone blocked the Zenith funding. I closed my eyes and let the feeling of victory wash over me. It was not a warm feeling. It was cold and hard, like steel. Miles Klein had tried to sell the company out from under my father to his own shell company. But he couldn't close the deal because I had bought the debt he needed to subordinate. I had cut the legs out from under his scheme. "Is my father there?" I asked. "He is sitting at his desk," Brenda whispered. "He looks like he has seen a ghost. Tell him to check his email." "Brenda, tell him to read the second page." I hung up. I waited. An hour later, my father called. "Piper," he said. His voice was hollow. The bluster was gone. The defensive anger was gone. He sounded like a man standing in the ruins of his own house. "You stopped it," he said. "I did. Miles says you killed the company. He says Zenith pulled the offer because you made the title toxic. Zenith didn't pull the offer. Dad, I blocked them. And I didn't kill the company. I saved it from being sold for parts by your wife's brother." He was silent for a long time. I read the second page. He said quietly, "You are funding the payroll?" "Yes. Why?" "Because the guys on the loading dock didn't sign that affidavit." I said, "They didn't kick me out. They shouldn't have to pay for your mistakes. Piper, don't." I said, "Don't apologize. It is too late for that. Just sign the forbearance agreement and fire Miles Klein." "I can't fire him," Everett said. "He is the only one who knows where the bodies are buried." That was a poor choice of words, Dad, because I brought a shovel. The next morning, the reality of the situation set in. Everett Morgan was a man who had spent 40 years building a reputation as a pillar of the community. He had convinced himself that his choices, even the cruel ones, were made to protect that legacy. Now, he was waking up to the realization that his legacy was a hollow shell, eaten away by the very people he had trusted to protect it. He had signed the forbearance agreement at midnight. He had no choice. I went to the office the next day. I walked through the front doors of Morgan Industrial Supply for the first time in 7 years. The lobby smelled exactly the same. Floor wax and stale coffee. Brenda looked up from her desk. Her eyes went wide. "Piper?" she breathed. "Hello." "Brenda," I said. I walked past her. I walked down the hallway lined with framed awards. I walked past the office where I used to sit and do my homework after school. I walked into the conference room. My father was there. So was the forensic auditor I had hired. A woman named Sarah Jenkins who had eyes like lasers. And Corinne was there. Corinne looked different. The polished veneer was cracking. Her hair was pulled back too tightly. Her hands were gripping her designer handbag as if it contained the last of her oxygen. She stood up when I walked in. "We don't have to do this. Piper," she said. Her voice was trembling, trying to find a pitch that sounded reasonable. "We can settle this like family. Sit down." "Corinne," I said. I sat at the head of the table. Sarah, the auditor, placed a stack of files in front of me. "We have run the preliminary numbers," Sarah said, her voice crisp and professional. "It is quite clear." She opened the first file. "Over the last 5 years," Sarah said, "Morgan Industrial Supply has paid $1.2 million in consulting fees to Ridley Logistics Solutions. We have traced the EIN. The company has no employees, no physical office, and no assets. It is a pass-through entity." She slid a paper across the table. "The funds were deposited into an account at First National." Sarah continued. "From there, they were transferred to a personal account held jointly by Garrison Ridley and Corinne Morgan." Everett made a sound like he had been punched in the stomach. He stared at the paper. He stared at his wife. "Corinne?" he rasped. Corinne's face flushed a deep, ugly red. "It was for the business," she cried. "Garrison was advising us. He was helping us navigate the market. He has no experience in logistics." "Corinne," I said calmly, "he is a failed real estate agent. And you paid him $20,000 a month while you were telling Dad we had to lay off the night shift." Everett stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You stole from me," he whispered. "I was protecting our future." Corinne screamed, dropping the mask. This company was dying. "Everett, you were too old and too stubborn to see it. I was building a nest egg. I was trying to save something before you drove it into the ground. So you accelerated the crash. I said, you and Miles worked together. You bled the accounts dry so the company would be desperate enough to take the predatory loan from Zenith. And then Zenith, which is just another pocket in your brother's coat, would foreclose and take the land. It was a controlled collapse, Everett said, the realization dawning on him with horrific clarity. You weren't managing the crisis. You were engineering it. Corinne looked at him with pure contempt. Someone had to be practical. She spat. You were paralyzed. Everett. Walking around in a daze, terrified that someone would find out about your past. Terrified that Piper would come back. You were weak. Miles and I, we were just doing what had to be done. I stood up. Get out, I said. Corinne looked at me. She laughed. A brittle sound. You think you have won? She asked. You think you can just walk in here and take over? You are a liability. Piper, you always were. I pointed to the door. Get out. She grabbed her bag. She looked at Everett, waiting for him to defend her, but Everett was looking at the table, at the evidence of his betrayal. Corinne walked out. The door slammed behind her. The silence in the room was heavy. Everett sank back into his chair. He looked small. He looked broken. I didn't know, he whispered. I swear to you. Piper, I didn't know. I know, I said. That is the problem. Dad, you chose not to know. You chose to be blind because it was easier than asking hard questions. Sarah gathered her files. I will give you some privacy, she said softly, when we were alone. My father looked at me. What happens now? He asked. Do you send me to jail? No. I said, but we have a problem. The fraud is real. The books are cooked. If we don't report it, we are complicit. But if we report it publicly, the banks will freeze everything. The customers will leave. The company dies. He nodded. He looked resigned. Then let it die, he said. It is rotten anyway. No, I said. I walked over to the window. I looked out at the warehouse yard. I saw Sam operating the crane. I saw the trucks moving. It is not rotten. I said, the bones are good. The people are good. Only the leadership was rotten. I turned back to him. I remembered something. Dad, something from 7 years ago. He looked up. The night you kicked me out. I said, you kept talking about the scandal, about how my pregnancy was a risk to the brand. Yes, he said, flinching. I told you. I was afraid of the paternity suit repeating itself. I know that is what you told yourself. I said, but there was something else. I walked back to the table and leaned on it. 2 weeks before you kicked me out, we had dinner. Do you remember? It was a Sunday. Corinne was there. Miles was there. He frowned. Trying to remember, I asked a question at that dinner. I said, I had been looking at the inventory reports. I asked why the system showed we had 500 units of Class A steel, but the yard only had Class B. I asked why the numbers didn't match the physical stock. Everett's eyes widened. I remember. Corinne got very upset. She spilled her wine. Yes, I said. She spilled her wine to stop the conversation. And the next day, Miles Klein started drafting the affidavit regarding my emotional instability. I let the words hang in the air. It wasn't the baby. Dad. The pregnancy was just the excuse. It was the convenient narrative. The real reason they had to get rid of me was that I had eyes. I noticed the inventory mismatch. I was the glitch in their matrix. Everett stared at me. His mouth fell open. They used my fear, he whispered. They used my fear of the old lawsuit to make me get rid of the only person who was actually watching the store. Exactly. I said, you thought you were protecting the family from a scandal, but you were actually protecting the thieves from a witness. He put his head in his hands and began to weep. It was a harsh, ugly sound. The sound of a man realizing that his entire moral universe had been built on a lie. I watched him. I felt a pang of pity, but I stamped it down. Pity wouldn't fix the balance sheet. I left him there and went to my hotel. I had a decision to make. I had the evidence. I could go to the district attorney. I could hand over the files on Corinne and Miles. They would go to prison. But if I did that, the company would be a crime scene. The accounts would be frozen for months, maybe years. The workers would be laid off. The vendors would sue. The innocent people, Brenda, Sam, the truck drivers, would lose everything. Or I could bury it. I could fire Corinne and Miles, restructure the debt, and pretend the fraud was just mismanagement. I could save the company quietly. But then Corinne would walk away with the money she stole. Miles would keep his law license. They would just move on to the next victim. I couldn't let them win, but I couldn't burn the village to kill the wolves. I needed a third path. I called a lawyer in D.C., a specialist in corporate governance and regulatory compliance. His name was Marcus. I need a controlled demolition. I told him, "Explain." He said, "I have evidence of insider fraud." I said, "But I need to report it in a way that separates the company from the individuals. I need to self-report to the regulators, agree to a monitor, and set up a restitution plan without triggering a criminal seizure of the operating accounts. It is a narrow needle to thread." "Piper," Marcus said, "you have to be perfect. You have to show that the rot has been excised. The rot is leaving the building today." I said, "The next morning, Corinne requested a meeting. She didn't come to the office. She came to my hotel. She met me in the lobby. She looked composed again. She had rebuilt her mask. Piper," she said, "I have a proposition." I drank my coffee. "I am listening." "We want to offer you a settlement, a family settlement." "Who is we?" I asked. "Miles and I, and Garrison." "Go on. We will pay you out." She said, "We will buy the debt back from you at a 20% premium. You make a profit. You go back to Pennsylvania. You live your life. And in exchange? In exchange, you sign a non-disparagement agreement. You seal the audit results." And we all agree that this was just a misunderstanding. She slid a check across the table. It was a cashier's check. $500,000. She said, "That is the premium, plus the principal repayment." I looked at the check. It was a lot of money. It was enough to pay off my mortgage. It was enough to send Leo to college twice. For a second, I was tempted. It would be so easy. Take the money. Leave this toxic town. Let them eat each other. But then, I thought about the affidavit. Emotional instability. I thought about the 7 years I spent wondering if I was crazy, wondering if I was broken. I looked at Corinne. "You think you can buy me?" I said, "You think everyone has a price because you sold your soul so long ago you forgot what it feels like to have one." I tore the check in half. I tore it in half again. "I don't want your money. Corinne, I want your license. I want your reputation. I want you to look over your shoulder for the rest of your life, wondering when the subpoena is coming." She stood up, her eyes blazing. "You are making a mistake. Piper, you are playing with people who play for keeps. So am I." I said. She stormed out. I went back to the office. Everett was there, packing a box. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I am resigning," he said. "I can't stay here. Not after what I know." "You can't resign yet." I said, "We need you." "Need me?" He laughed bitterly. "I am the fool who let this happen. You are the CEO." I said, "And we need a transition. If you leave now, the banks will panic. You have to stay until we install the new governance structure. You have to help me clean this up." He looked at me. "Why would you want me to stay? After what I did to you?" "Because I am not you." I said. He flinched. "I am not going to kick you out. Dad, I am going to make you work. I am going to make you fix it." He sat down heavily on his packed box. "Piper, please. Just don't report it. If you report it, the scandal, the papers." I stopped him. "The scandal." I said, "Always the scandal." I walked over to him. I looked down at the man who had dominated my childhood. "You spent your whole life terrified of what people would say. You were so afraid of a story about an illegitimate child, or a story about a messy family, that you let thieves rob you blind just to keep the curtains drawn." "I didn't want the family to look bad," he whispered. I leaned in close. "You didn't protect the family, Dad. You protected the story you wanted to tell about yourself." He looked at me, and I saw the light go out of his eyes. He knew it was true. He had sacrificed his daughter to save his vanity. I am going to report it, I said, but I'm going to do it my way. I am filing a voluntary disclosure with the SEC and the State Attorney General. We are going to cooperate. We are going to sue Corinne and Miles for civil fraud to recover the funds. It will be public, he said. Everyone will know I was a fool. Yes, I said, they will. But at least you will be an honest fool, and the company will survive. I walked out of his office. I felt lighter. The weight of the secret was gone. I went to my desk, the temporary one I had set up in the conference room. I called Marcus. File the disclosure. I said, "We are crossing the Rubicon." "Piper," Marcus said. "Cross it." 2 hours later, my email pinged. It wasn't a confirmation from the regulators. It was a legal filing. Greer & Klein Legal Group versus Morgan River Holdings, LLC, motion for temporary restraining order and declaratory judgment. I opened the document. My eyes scanned the legalese. Miles Klein wasn't going down without a fight. He was challenging the assignment of the debt. He was arguing that my purchase was invalid. Plaintiff alleges that the defendant, Piper Morgan, acting through her alter ego, Morgan River Holdings, engaged in insider trading and breached fiduciary duties owed to the company as a former equitable owner. Plaintiff asserts that the purchase of the debt creates an irreconcilable conflict of interest and violates the corporate opportunity doctrine. He was claiming that because I was my father's daughter, I wasn't allowed to be his creditor. He was claiming that I had used insider knowledge, the knowledge I gained from being kicked out, to hijack the company. It was a desperate, twisted argument, but it was enough to muddy the waters. The filing requested an immediate freeze on all enforcement actions. It demanded that the court invalidate my ownership of the debt. If the judge granted this, I would be locked in litigation for years. My capital would be frozen. The company would bleed out while lawyers argued about fiduciary duties. Miles knew he couldn't win on the merits, but he knew he could bleed me dry on the process. My phone rang. It was Miles. "Hello? Piper," he said. "You filed a frivolous motion." "Miles," I said, "you know it won't stand." "It doesn't have to stand forever," he said smoothly. "It just has to stand long enough to bankrupt you. You put your life savings into this, didn't you?" "Every penny." I didn't answer. "If we go to court, Piper, I will depose you. I will drag up your medical records. I will drag up the old affidavit. I will make the public question your stability. I will make this very, very ugly. Or," I asked, "or you sell the debt to my client, today, at cost. You walk away with your money, and we forget this ever happened." I gripped the phone. He was doing it again. He was using fear. He was using the threat of exposure. He thought I was my father. He thought I would protect the story. I looked at the filing on my screen. I am not my father. "Miles," I said. I hung up. I looked at the clock. The courthouse closed in an hour. I wasn't going to settle. I wasn't going to sell. I was going to court. And I wasn't going as a victim. I was going as the plaintiff. I typed a message to Marcus. He filed. "Prepare the countersuit. Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. RICO. We are not just suing him for fraud. We are suing him for running a criminal enterprise." I closed my laptop. The war wasn't over. It had just moved to a new battlefield. The courtroom smelled of floor wax, old paper, and the distinct, stale anxiety of people whose futures were about to be decided by a stranger in a black robe. I sat at the plaintiff's table. To my right sat Marcus, my attorney from D.C., who wore a suit that cost more than my first car but looked like he had slept in it. He was a man of details, not drama. On the table in front of us were 3 bankers' boxes filled with binders. Across the aisle, Miles Klein sat like a king holding court. He had 3 junior associates with him, all frantically highlighting documents. He looked confident. He smiled at the bailiff. He nodded at the clerk. He was playing the role of the local hero defending a pillar of the community against an invading barbarian. I was the barbarian. My father, Everett, sat behind Miles. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. He was staring at the back of Miles's head, as if trying to remember who he was. Corinne sat next to him, upright. rigid, wearing a black dress that suggested she was already in mourning for her bank account. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Harrison entered. He was a man in his 60s with reading glasses perched at the end of his nose and an expression that suggested he had zero tolerance for theater. "We are here on the matter of Greer and Klein versus Morgan River Holdings," he said, shuffling papers, and the counter-motion for the appointment of a receiver. "Mr. Klein, you filed the emergency motion. You have the floor." Miles stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He moved with the grace of a dancer. "Your Honor," he began, his voice smooth and projecting to the back of the room. "This case is a tragedy. It is the story of a disgruntled daughter returning home to destroy her father's legacy using insider information and vindictive tactics." He pointed a manicured finger at me. "Ms. Morgan, hiding behind a shell company, has purchased the debt of her father's business. She has done so not for commercial reasons, but for personal retribution. We argue that her actions constitute a breach of the fiduciary duty she owed the family trust, and that her aggressive acceleration of the loan is an abuse of process designed to force a bankruptcy that will harm the community. We ask the court to freeze her enforcement actions and invalidate the assignment of the debt." He spoke for 20 minutes. It was a beautiful speech. It was full of emotion, appeals to family values, and dark insinuations about my mental state. When he sat down, he looked satisfied. Judge Harrison looked at Marcus. "Counsel?" Marcus stood up. He didn't walk around. He didn't point. He just picked up a piece of paper. "Your Honor," he said, his voice flat, "we are not here to discuss family therapy. We are here to discuss contract law. My client purchased a valid debt instrument on the open market. The borrower is in default. The borrower attempted to secure secondary financing in violation of the loan covenants. My client exercised her contractual right to protect her collateral." Marcus dropped a heavy binder on the table. It made a loud thud. "Furthermore," he continued, "the plaintiff claims my client is acting out of malice. We have evidence that my client is the only thing standing between this company and a massive scheme of corporate looting orchestrated by the plaintiff himself." Miles jumped up. "Objection. That is slander." Judge Harrison looked over his glasses. "It is an opening statement. Mr. Klein, sit down. Continue. Counsel, we have conducted a forensic audit." Marcus said, "We intend to show that the company's distress was manufactured. We intend to show that funds were siphoned out of the company and into accounts controlled by parties in this room. My client isn't destroying the company. Your Honor, she is the crime scene investigator. The air in the room changed. The boredom vanished. Marcus called our first witness, Sarah Jenkins. The forensic auditor. Sarah took the stand. She was precise, clinical, and terrifyingly competent. "Ms. Jenkins," Marcus asked, "did you review the accounts of Morgan Industrial Supply?" "I did. And what did you find regarding a vendor named Ridley Logistics Solutions?" Sarah adjusted her glasses. "I found that over a period of 5 years, $1.2 million was paid to Ridley Logistics for consulting services. I found no evidence of any work product. No reports, no emails, no deliverables. And who owns Ridley Logistics?" "It is a shell company registered in Delaware," Sarah said. "The beneficial owners are listed as Garrison Ridley and Corinne Morgan." A murmur went through the gallery. I saw Corinne stiffen. She stared straight ahead. "And did you find any connection to the plaintiff?" "Mr. Klein?" Marcus asked. Sarah nodded. She pulled a document from her folder. "I did. The incorporation papers for Ridley Logistics were filed by Greer and Klein Legal Group, and on the bank account opening documents for the shell company. There is a signature for the authorized signatory." "Whose signature is it?" "It is Mr. Klein's signature," Sarah said. The courtroom went silent. Miles Klein wasn't just the lawyer representing the thieves. He was the banker. He had set up the account. He had facilitated the transfers. Miles stood up, his face pale. "Your Honor, this is a misinterpretation of standard legal services. We often assist clients with entity formation." Judge Harrison looked at Miles. His eyes were cold. "Mr. Klein, did you authorize transfers from your client's operating account to a shell company you helped create?" which was owned by the client's wife. I acted on instruction. Miles stammered. Whose instruction? The judge asked. Miles looked at Everett. He looked at Corinne. He was looking for a bus to throw them under. Mr. Morgan's instruction, Miles said. He is the CEO. Marcus stood up. We call Everett Morgan to the stand. My father stood up slowly. He looked 80 years old. He walked to the witness box and took the oath. His hand shook so badly the Bible nearly slipped. Mr. Morgan, Marcus asked, did you instruct Mr. Klein to set up Ridley Logistics? Everett looked at me. Then he looked at Corinne. No, he whispered. Speak up, sir. The judge said. No, Everett said. Louder. I didn't know it existed. Corinne told me she was handling the logistics consultants. I just signed the check she put in front of me. And were you aware that Mr. Klein was also representing the private lender, Zenith Capital? Who offered you the bailout loan? Everett shook his head. No, he told me Zenith was an independent firm from New York. So, Marcus said, Mr. Klein represented you, the borrower, while simultaneously having a financial interest in the lender, and while managing the shell company that was draining your cash flow? Everett looked at Miles. The betrayal on his face was raw and painful to watch. He told me he was protecting the family. Everett said. Marcus paused. He walked over to the witness stand. He held a document in his hand. Mr. Morgan, the plaintiff has argued that my client, your daughter, is unstable, that she is unfit to hold this debt. Is that your view? Everett looked down at his hands. I don't know. Marcus handed him the document. It was the affidavit from 7 years ago. Do you recognize this? Marcus asked. Yes. What is it? It is a severance agreement. From when Piper left. Please read Clause 7 aloud. Everett swallowed hard. He put on his reading glasses. The beneficiary acknowledges that her current condition is the result of reckless behavior and agrees to undergo psychological evaluation and attests that she has a history of emotional instability. He stopped. The words hung in the air. Ugly and cruel. Did you write that? Mr. Morgan? Marcus asked. No, Everett said. Who wrote it? Everett looked at Miles. He did. Everett pointed. Miles wrote it. He told me it was necessary. He told me Piper was a danger. He told me that if we didn't discredit her, she would use the baby to destroy the trust. And did you believe him? I was afraid. Everett whispered. I was afraid of the scandal. So you tried to force your pregnant daughter to sign a confession of insanity to protect your reputation? Everett started to cry. It wasn't a theatrical sob. It was the quiet, leaking grief of a man realizing he was the villain of his own life story. It sounds monstrous, he said. Hearing it now, it sounds monstrous. No further questions, Marcus said. Everett stepped down. He didn't go back to his seat. He sat in the back row, alone. Next, we called Corinne. She walked to the stand with her head high, but her eyes were darting around the room like a trapped animal. Mrs. Morgan, Marcus said, you heard the auditor. $1.2 million. Where is the money? It is in a secure investment account. Corinne said. Her voice was brittle. I was holding it in reserve. Everett was mismanaging the company. I was trying to save it. By hiding it in your brother's name? My brother is a trusted advisor. And the payments to Zenith Capital? The predatory loan? Was that also saving the company? Corinne's composure cracked. She slammed her hand on the railing. I did what I had to do. You don't understand. I have given 10 years of my life to that old man. Dealing with his moods, his paranoia, his obsession with his precious legacy. I deserved some security. So it was payment? Marcus asked. For putting up with your husband? It was my share, she screamed. The company was going under anyway. Why shouldn't I take what I could before the ship went down? The courtroom gasped. She had admitted it. It wasn't business. It was looting. Miles stood up. Your Honor, I object. The witness is under duress. Sit down. Mr. Klein, the judge barked, or I will have you removed. Corinne looked around, realizing what she had said. She slumped in the chair. I didn't steal it, she muttered. I just moved it. Marcus turned to the judge. Your Honor, we have established fraud. We have established self-dealing. We have established a conspiracy between the CEO's wife and the company's counsel to strip the assets. He pointed at me. My client is asking for a specific remedy. She is not asking to liquidate the company. She is asking to save it. Piper, stand up. Marcus whispered to me. I stood up. My legs felt solid. I wasn't shaking anymore. Ms. Morgan, the judge said, looking at me with a new respect. What is your proposal? I took a deep breath. Your Honor, I propose the immediate appointment of a neutral receiver to take control of the company's finances. I propose that the debt I hold be restructured to lower the interest payments, allowing the company to meet payroll. And the ownership? The judge asked. I propose that Mr. Morgan and Mrs. Morgan be removed from all operational roles immediately. I said, and that a constructive trust be placed on the assets of Corinne Morgan and Miles Klein to recover the stolen funds. And then, I said, looking at the employees sitting in the back of the room. Brenda was there, and Sam, and then, we transition the ownership. I do not wish to own the company, Your Honor. I wish to convert the equity into an employee stock ownership plan. The people who built the company should own it, not the people who tried to destroy it. The judge raised his eyebrows. You want to give it away? I want to give it back, I said. Miles Klein couldn't help himself. He stood up, his face red, his veneer of control completely gone. This is ridiculous, he shouted. She is playing Robin Hood. Your Honor, this woman is a bitter, unstable single mother who is using this court to work out her daddy issues. She has no business acumen. She is a logistics clerk. The silence that followed was absolute. Miles had made the classic mistake of a bully. He thought that attacking my status would diminish me, but in that room, after the evidence we had just seen, it only diminished him. Judge Harrison took off his glasses. He cleaned them slowly. He put them back on. Mr. Klein, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register, you have drafted fraudulent documents. You have facilitated embezzlement, and now, you have insulted a litigant who has shown more business acumen in 5 minutes than you have shown in your entire career. The judge leaned forward. I am granting the motion for a receiver. I am freezing the assets of Greer and Klein Legal Group pending a review by the State Bar, and I am referring the transcript of this hearing to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges regarding the theft of corporate funds. Miles slumped into his chair. He looked at his associates, but they were already packing their bags, distancing themselves from the blast radius. And Mrs. Morgan, the judge added, looking at Corinne, you are ordered to surrender your passport. You are not to leave the jurisdiction. Corinne put her head in her hands. The gavel came down. It sounded like a gunshot. Court is adjourned. The room erupted into noise. Reporters were running out the door. Brenda was hugging Sam in the back row. I stood still. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Marcus. We did it, he said. We did. I said. I gathered my files. I walked down the aisle. Miles Klein was sitting at his table, staring at nothing. He didn't look at me as I passed. He was already a ghost. I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright, cold afternoon sun. My father was standing on the steps. He was alone. He looked at me. He looked stripped down, like a house after a fire. Piper, he said. I stopped. He took a step toward me, then stopped. Respecting the distance, I didn't know how to stop them. He said, once it started, I was just so afraid. I know. I said. He looked at the ground. Did you come back to punish me? He asked quietly. Is that what this was? I looked at him. I looked at the lines in his face, the fear that had ruled him for 30 years. No, Dad, I said. I didn't come back to punish you. Then why? I thought of Leo. I thought of the way he laughed without worry. I thought of the future I was building for him. I came back so my son would never inherit a legacy of fear. I said, I came back to break the silence, because silence is where the rot grows. He nodded slowly. You are a better person than I am, he said. I didn't argue with him. What will you do now? He asked. I am going home, I said. I have a job. I have a son. I have a life. And the company? It belongs to Sam and Brenda now. I said, they will take care of it. I turned to walk away. Piper? He called out. I paused. Can I see him? Someday? The boy? I thought about it. I thought about forgiveness. Forgiveness wasn't forgetting. It was just deciding not to carry the stone anymore. Maybe, I said, someday, when you have learned how to tell the truth. I walked to my car. I got in. I started the engine. I drove past the Welcome to Halston sign. I didn't look back. I had bought the debt. I had exposed the fraud. I had saved the jobs. But the most important thing I had done was rewrite the ending of the story. I wasn't a liability. I was the author. And the next chapter belonged to me. Thank you for listening to You Are a Liability. My dad kicked me out pregnant. 7 years later. I bought his debt. The lawyer. I hope you enjoyed this story of justice, resilience, and breaking the cycle. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please leave a comment below and tell me which part of Piper's journey resonated with you the most. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of tables turning and justice being served. Share your thoughts in English in the comments section. I read every single one. Until next time, remember, the best revenge is not destroying your enemies, but outgrowing them.